A new bipartisan congressional resolution calls on United States officials to drop charges against Wikileaks founder Julian Assange. Republican Representative Paul Gosar introduced a resolution stating that, quote, regular journalistic activities are protected by the First Amendment and that the United States government should end the prosecution of Assange, who's accused of publishing classified military documents.
And in other Assange news, his final appeal will be held in the United Kingdom High Court February 20th and 21st of next year. The public two-day hearing could be the final opportunity for Assange to prevent his extradition to the United States, where he faces an 175-year sentence. Joining us now to weigh in is Julian Assange's lead lawyer on the CIA case, Richard Roth. We recently had a little bit of a positive news development. Can you tell us about that first?
Yeah, very good news. We represent the individuals, the U.S. citizens that visited the Ecuadorian embassy in London during the time period that he was there. And what we learned through a litigation that was happening in Spain was that the CIA wrongfully actually spied on the individuals that visited him by imaging their cameras, their phones, their laptops, their Apple equipment without telling them, and then it went back to the CIA. So we sued the CIA and Mike Pompeo in federal court in New York, the Southern District, alleging essentially under the Fourth Amendment it's a wrongful search and seizure without a search warrant. The federal government made a motion to dismiss, claiming that they can't be sued because they are the CIA. And last week on Friday, I believe it was, the federal court came down with a decision, Judge Cattell, stating, no, CIA, you're wrong. You can be sued. If your spying was illegal, then there's repercussions. So the court just denied the CIA. The simple answer is the court just denied the CIA's motion to dismiss. It granted it on behalf of Pompeo. But we are now continuing our lawsuit against the CIA for wrongfully engaging the conduct in which it engaged.
And just to get technical for 1 minute here, was this like a qualified immunity issue? Is it that you are suing specific agents, or you're suing the agency? Because I don't even understand the argument for why that wouldn't be. There's nowhere in the Constitution does it say, well, if you're the CIA, you don't have to grant due process or get warrants for things.
Yeah, well, there are several arguments. They hit us as expected with a barrage of arguments, one of which was immunity, one of which was a reasonable expectation of privacy, stating that the people that went in, our clients, did not have an expectation of privacy. They thought that the CIA could rummage through their information, which was somewhat nonsensical. So there were a lot of arguments they made, standing arguments they made, and the court essentially, knocking one bowling pin down at a time, rejected every one of those arguments, stating, no, CIA, if you wrongfully went into their computers and imaged them, you can't do that. And what's even worse is that some of the people that visited Julian Assange during that time period, our clients, are lawyers. So think about it. Lawyers walk in with a laptop, they give it to a company, the company then images it and sends it to the CIA. What's in that laptop is not only confidential information between the lawyers and Julian Assange, but there's confidential information between those lawyers and other clients. The same is true with doctors. When doctors go to visit Julian Assange, the doctor-patient privilege is blown up when, in fact, the CIA has all of the medical information and doctor's notes and prescriptions and diagnoses of Julian Assange that they're not entitled to. So it's a very, very outrageous conduct by the CIA, which we're going to hold them accountable for.
It's really an incredible story, and the implications of them being two of the parties involved being lawyers, as you pointed out, is really extraordinary. I do wonder if we see any relationship between this lawsuit and the broader goal of freeing Julian Assange. Is this the kind of pressure campaign that you hope might have some influence here as we are looking to this February date, potential extradition deciding date next year? And also, I wonder if you can speak a little bit to what legal arguments are left in this last-ditch effort to stop extradition.
So, I'll compound question, but I'll answer it all. First of all, the primary purpose of this case is to essentially is to compensate the victims, the people that visited him, for the wrongful conduct of the CIA. That being said, you're right. There is a byproduct in this case. We are bringing attention to what we call the outrageousness of what the federal government is doing to Julian Assange. He was and has always been a reporter. And for no reason, they decided to essentially indict him. We know that Mike Pompeo, in his very first speech when he became the director of the CIA, deemed Julian Assange a hostile, non-state terrorist organization for some crazy reason. And we do think, just like the press thinks, just like the congressmen think, just like the senators think, that you cannot put an investigative reporter in jail for performing his investigative reporting. It so goes against every concept we know of the First Amendment and of people like you who are reporters who shouldn't be in fear of what they report. So yes, that is a byproduct of that. As far as the extradition and what's going on in February, I am not on top of that. That's really the British lawyers. I know it's a last fight. I know that he has lost before, and I can't give you any comments on what's happening in February 20th, 21st. But as far as we're concerned, the CIA was wrong in essentially stealing this information from the individuals, and bringing attention to what's happening to Julian Assange is actually a necessary and important byproduct of the litigation.
Well, and it shows the hypocrisy of the government's position that they're, accusing Assange of law breaking, which obviously I agree with you. The First Amendment should protect journalistic activities, including and especially what Julian Assange did. But even under some warped understanding of that as law breaking, well, the CIA, our own government, is being shown allegedly to have violated the law at every turn in order to entrap him.
Yeah, there's a certain irony to it. They are claiming that he wrongfully obtained information. That's the reason they're saying that they want to try Julian Assange for wrongfully obtaining information. Yet the federal government is wrongfully obtaining information against him. So there is an irony and there is an outrage, and there are a lot of organizations that's now finally coming to the surface, because if and when he is extradited, and he probably will be. The big issue will be is, should this man be tried for publishing information he obtained? I mean, it's no different than what you guys do, what the New York Times does, what Fox does, what CNN does. If you get information from the government, as long as you are not involved in this taking of it, you have an obligation to let that out. So there is a hypocrisy here, and it's just so apparent. That we're hoping that one day the Biden administration may very well pardon Assange if, in fact, it gets that far.
How hopeful are you about that? It's become a little bit of an issue in the primaries that candidates are using to distinguish themselves from Biden, his unwillingness to do so.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone... we're not hopeful until after the election results. If, in fact, Biden loses, then, and there's been pressure put on Biden, maybe before he leaves, he will pardon him. If he wins and he knows he's the next president for 4 years, he may also pardon him. So I don't think anything's going to happen until after the election. But this is becoming, now that once Assange is brought to the U.S., we expect him to be brought to the U.S., we'd like to win in London. I don't think we will. But once he comes, then it'll become front and center. Do you try a person who is essentially publishes material, which is vital to the country and the individuals and the citizens knowing? So I think it's going to come out much more if, in fact, he's in the U.S. I don't think any pardon will happen, in direct answer to your question, until he actually until the next election. I just think it's a very volatile issue both ways.
Mm. Yeah, and of course, some conservatives, certainly not all, but some conservative voices have spoken up for pardoning Julian Assange as well. So it'll be interesting, if we get next Republican administration, if there's any pressure that way. I know, for instance, Tucker Carlson actually visited Assange a couple of weeks ago, I believe. So we hope there's attention on this from both left and right. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss this case. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.